Boys, what's going on? What's going on? Welcome to the stream. Let me just pull this thing up quickly. Welcome. Let's just throw this thing up quickly and make sure everything's working properly. Let's just throw this thing up. There we go. It works. Let's do that. Set that goal quickly. Usually I like to wait a little bit just to allow some people to get into the stream. Notifications don't go out right away for live stream, so I'll just wait a couple seconds, make sure everything's working on my end, and then we can really get started on the stream. Let's load this up. Usually before we get the stream started, we like to talk about some news that happened over the previous however long. And we like to start with that to spark some conversations, to spark some questions in chat, and we go forward from there. So this previous weekend this previous day, we had some news that came out. We had some news about this potential fight that has been made official. We have Carlos Prates versus Neal. This was a fight that was supposed to happen a while back, but it was rebooked. Now it's going to be on UFC 319. And it's a pretty good fight. It's definitely a fight that's pretty high pace, pretty high action-packed. I think Prates is going to get the win in the end, but you definitely cannot sleep on Geoff Neal. He definitely is a really good fighter and has really good boxing on that inside range. Rick, what's going on, brother? Welcome to the stream. So tell me. It's a good question. I mean, I'm sure Dana would make an exception for something like this. I mean, it's a pretty historic event, but if he doesn't, I don't know if they're trying to put together some sort of structure. I mean, it's probably not that likely, but I don't really know what their plans are. But I know, Dana as well as the UFC has already talked about plans of potentially putting that card together. So I'm sure they're figuring things out. I'm sure Dana is going to be a little bit more willing to do an open air stadium or arena or whatever, for an event like this as opposed to for some other events. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously there are a lot of question marks. Who's going to be on the card? What the card's going to look like? Can the card even happen? This is definitely something that we haven't seen before, but the UFC has done a decent job at putting cards together in the past that, that it seemed like they wouldn't be able to do with the Sphere and some other cards as well. So I think they'll be able to put it together. I was going to make an exception. He's at the mercy of the weather, bro. It's going to rain on the fighters. Well, I mean, I'm sure they'll have some sort of plan for that. There has been outdoor events before in sports, boxing or whatever. Usually they have a top over top of them or something. I don't know what it's going to look like. I'm not sure, but I don't think I think Dana and the UFC and Trump or whoever before going into this thought about some of those things. At least Dana did, I'm sure. So I'm sure he'll have some solutions for that, but we'll see how it pans out. I mean, who knows if it's even going to happen. It seems like it might, but who knows at the end of the day. But yeah, so as I said, Geoff Neal versus Carlos Prates. This should be a pretty good one. I think both of these guys are really going to go for it. Prates is coming off a loss. I think he's going to really look to avenge that. He did go up against a pretty good opponent in Ian Gary and lost, a relatively close decision at the end. He almost finished Ian, but yeah, it's a pretty good one. And Geoff Neal is, as I said, a guy who's going to push forward a lot. He's really going to go for it as well. Going to look to get on that inside boxing range. I mean, he even gave a guy like Shavkat Rakhmonov trouble when they fought. So I think this is going to be a really good fight. And adding a fight like this to UFC 319, I think is definitely going to be a real boost for that card. Because when you look at that card overall, yes, they had the main event, but outside of that, they don't have too many great fights. So I think this is a really good addition to that card. But next, yeah, we can quickly talk about this. I talked about this fight a lot for this upcoming weekend between Derek Lewis and Taliesin Teixeira. I said Talison's going to win basically based on physical traits. This is kind of what I meant. I mean, he's going to have a significantly longer reach. He's potentially even more powerful than Derek Lewis, but it's probably close in terms of the power. But also, he's going to be a lot more skilled, at least in my opinion, from the limited sample size that we've seen him in. So I think Talison's going to be able to eat some shots, and I think he's going to be able to land effectively, utilizing that reach advantage that he does have. And at the end of the day, I think we're going to be talking about a Taliesin Teixeira victory over Derek Lewis. And then the next thing I wanted to touch upon is the bout order for this upcoming card at UFC 318. I mean, a lot of people, including myself, don't think it's an amazing card. I think there certainly could be better fights added to the card. I think there could be more meaningful fights that should probably be added to the card. I do agree with that, but they did a decent job at adding some fights to the card, and I would say there's a decent amount of fun fights. Just looking at the prelims, I mean, Bruno Ferreira is usually a fun fighter, so that could be fun. Is it going to be super high level? Probably not, but it could be fun. Ryan Spann versus Bretsky. Also, neither one of these guys are really high level, but it could be fun. Ryan Spann is usually in finishes one way or the other, so we'll see what happens there. Jimmy Crute versus Prochnow. I mean, definitely not a high level fight, but could be a lot of action. Another one, I mean, Antiba. I can't say this guy's name, but he's a really exciting fighter, and Robert also really goes for it as well. I'm definitely expecting Antiba or whatever to get the victory. I think he's super powerful. I think he's actually relatively technical for how early on in MMA he is. So I think he has a pretty bright future ahead of himself. But we'll see how that goes out and that pans out. But I do think this is going to be a really fun fight. Prado, I mean, usually he puts on fun performances. Brennan Allen versus Marvin Vettori. This should be, a decent fight. Marvin Vettori is, he hasn't fought in a little bit. He's not too active as of late. And he's not the most exciting guy in the world. Brennan Allen probably isn't either, but at least there's some promise with Brennan Allen, at least I think personally. Then Kyler Phillips versus Vinicius Oliveira. I think this is actually going to be a really fun fight. I'm pretty high on Vinicius. I think he's going to be really good. I think he has the physical tools to be very good at the bantamweight division. He hits pretty hard. He has decent cardio. He can take a shot really well. We've seen that in a couple of different fights. And overall, I just think Vinicius is also continuously getting better. So I think this is going to be a really fun fight, and I think Vinicius is going to win that in the end. And then when you move on to the main card, you have Michael Johnson versus Daniel Zellhuber. In my opinion, this is really not a main card fight. But Zellhuber is usually a pretty fun guy to watch, and Michael Johnson is as well. So another one of those fun fights, not super high level, but fun fights. So we'll see what happens there. Dan Ige versus Patricio Pitbull. That's also going to be one that's probably going to be pretty good. I know Patricio doesn't always go for it all the time, and sometimes he could have boring performances, like actually we saw in his last fight versus Yair. But he does have those moments where he sees an opportunity and he goes for it. And Dan Ige is going to be pushing the pace as much as he possibly can. So I think that has a chance to be a pretty fun fight. Then you have Kevin Holland versus D-Rod. That's going to be a good one. I talked about this a little bit, but at welterweight, Kevin Holland is actually pretty good in my opinion. He hits really hard. He can take a shot really well. Even on the ground, his jiu-jitsu is pretty good. He's got a couple submission victories under his belt at the welterweight division. I think at welterweight, he's trying a little bit more than he does maybe at 185, and I also think he's a lot more well-suited for welterweight than he is at 185. So I kind of, I'm probably going to make a video talking about this a little bit more in depth before this fight happens. But I kind of feel like Kevin Holland is taking his career a little bit more seriously at this point, which is definitely a huge positive for him. And I think he can be like a legitimate contender at the welterweight division. Will he ever become a champion? I would say probably not. But, he has a lot of physical tools. He has the length. He hits really hard. He can take a shot really well, alongside with certain skills. I mean, he's decently skilled on the feet, I would say. He mostly has success on the feet because of his length and power, but still, he has an ability to strike a little bit. And on the ground, he has decent jiu-jitsu, I would say. As I said, he has a decent amount of submissions under his belt at the welterweight division. But then you have Paulo Costa versus Kopylov. This one should be a pretty fun one. I mean, Paulo Costa, Really hasn't been the same ever since the Israel Adesanya fight, but still, he's usually a relatively exciting fighter. So we'll see how he looks in there. And Kopylov is always an exciting fighter, really good striker, great body kicks, does a great job at mixing things up. And usually when Roman Kopylov is out there, it's usually a pretty exciting and fun fight. And then the main event, obviously, is for the BMF title, whatever. But it's just a fun main event. It's Max Holloway versus Dustin Poirier, two guys that are certainly going to go for it. It's Dustin's retirement fight. Both guys are going to be pushing to get a victory. Max Holloway is 0-2 against Dustin, and for Dustin, he's fighting in his hometown or home state, I guess. And also, it's his retirement fight. So both of these guys are certainly going to be going for it. I think we're in for a real treat for that main event. And yeah, so as I said, this card doesn't have like super high level skilled fights. I mean, even when we look at the main card, you have Max Holloway, who's he's technically ranked number one at 145, I believe, but I guess like top five rankings or top seven rankings at 155. You have Dustin, number five ranked guy. But outside of the main event, most of these guys are pretty low in the rankings or not ranked at all. When you talk about Paulo at 13, Kopylov at 14, Kevin Holland at 14, D-Rod not even ranked. Patricio Pitbull not even ranked. Ige at 14. Johnson and Zellhuber not even ranked. And when you look here, you have Kyler and Vinicius ranked, Vittori and Brennan Allen ranked, but outside of that, nobody else is ranked on this card. So yeah, it's a fun card, but but um, but it's not necessarily the highest skilled card in the world. But we'll see what happens on that card. Should be a relatively fun one. And yeah, but yeah, outside of those couple little announcements that I brought up and told you guys, we of course also have the Derek Lewis versus Talison Teixeira card coming up. I've talked about this a few times. I mean, I think the main event is kind of what it is. I think it's probably going to be a first or second round finish. Talison Teixeira is going to get the job done based on his overall tools. I think the length, power, even skill. I think he has the edge in. So at the end of the day, I think Talison Teixeira is going to be able to find the victory one way or the other within the first two rounds, whether that's at range or whether that's in the clinch with elbows. I think Talison's going to have an advantage in both of those areas, and we'll see what happens there. I mean, the co-main event, Wonderboy versus Bonfim. I know Wonderboy is a significant underdog in this fight. I believe like plus 300 or so. But in my opinion, I think Wonderboy does actually have a real chance in this fight. On the feet, I think he's just better than Bonfim. Bonfim, he has some tools on the feet. He hits pretty hard and he's pretty physical, both on the feet as well as on the ground. And I think that's really his path to success, at least on the feet. But if Wonderboy can stop takedowns and keep the fight on the feet, I really do think he can have a lot of success. He's going to be significantly more skilled than Bonfim. He does need to worry about, taking a huge shot and getting knocked out. But outside of that, I think Wonderboy could have success on the feet. Now, is it going to happen? Probably not. I would lean towards Gabriel Bonfim for sure, but I think Wonderboy at the very least has a real chance to at least make this fight competitive, I'll say. But outside of that, we have Calvin Kattar versus Steve Garcia. Talked about this a bunch of times. This is going to be a really, really fun fight, in my opinion. Both of these guys really go for it. The slick boxing of Calvin Kattar, Steve Garcia, just getting in the pocket and just throwing down. So that's going to be a really fun one. Nate Landwehr versus Morgan Charrier. I know Morgan's a pretty big favorite, but in my opinion, I think there's probably real value on Nate Landwehr. So that could potentially be an area where I would look to take value on. But in terms of the fight itself, I think it's going to be fun. And Petrino versus Lane, that's definitely going to be a lot of action. Not a lot of skill, but a lot of action. Then you have Junior Tafa versus Tuxios. It's whatever. I'm not too high on Junior Tafa, honestly. And then we have some other fights as well. Let's quickly bring up FanDuel. We haven't done this in a little bit. Just to give you guys some best bets for this upcoming weekend. I haven't done too much research on it. I mean, it's Tuesday. We don't really have props out yet. It is a little bit too early. But still, I'll just take an initial look and see what value I like on this card and give out some value to you guys. So let's start with the prelims, and we'll go from there. So Possibly some value here on Cheaty. I do believe Cheaty's going to win this fight. If he isn't able to finish Jake Matthews early, though, or at least hurt him, or at least bank rounds early, I think that could be an issue for him. He does tend to gas out if he goes all out and his opponents just don't go away. So that is the worry with Cheaty, but at minus 158, I think it's a decent bet. I think in terms of skill, in terms of power, in terms of physicality, he is going to be better than Jake Matthews. But I guess the question would be, is he going to be able to finish him early? If not, it could be some trouble. For Max Griffin versus Chris Curtis, I think Curtis should win. I know in the PFL, I believe he had a 1-3 record at welterweight, but I think Chris Curtis should win this fight. I mean, in my opinion, he's just better than Max Griffin. If Max Griffin decides to utilize footwork, get on the outside, maybe look to utilize leg kicks, jabs, right straights, but just avoiding the pocket with Chris Curtis, there's a chance he can win that fight. Chris Curtis's main issue, which is, in my opinion, a weird reason why he moved down. It's not like he was getting knocked out like every fight. The reason why Chris Curtis was having trouble at 185 was just because guys would look to utilize movement on him, and Chris Curtis would just have no plan B, and he would have no adjustment whatsoever. So if Max Griffin is able to do that, of course, he could find the victory. That seems to be the key to beating Chris Curtis, just utilizing footwork. But in my opinion, I do think Chris Curtis is going to win this fight. Let's just put this thing on quickly. There we go. Outside of that, we have Junior Tafa. I mean, I think Junior Tafa is probably going to win this fight, but I'm pretty low on Tafa, so maybe take a shot at the plus money. I don't think Tuco's really good whatsoever, but I just also don't think Junior Tafa is good at all either. He can't really stop takedowns. He can't stop leg kicks. He doesn't really have much power on the feet. There's really not too much to like about Junior Tafa, but um, you know, with that being said, I do think he's probably going to win this fight, but maybe you take the plus money against a bad fighter, and you go from there. Petrino versus Austin Lane. I think both of these guys are really not good, to be honest. But Petrino's a lot more powerful as well as a lot more durable than Lane is. So I think Petrino's definitely going to find the victory in the end. Austin Lane kind of has a habit of having success and getting a little bit overexcited and then kind of running into a big shot. We saw that in honestly most of his fights. He does that. And at this point, I don't think it's wise to expect any sort of improvements from Austin Lane or anything like that. So I think he's probably just going to get knocked out again in this fight. A lot of damage for one guy, a lot of knockouts for one guy, which is unfortunate, but it's kind of how Austin Lane fights, and he really hasn't made adjustments, unfortunately. Then we have Nate Landwehr. I talked about this a little bit before. Nate Landwehr versus Morgan Charrier. In my opinion, I actually think there's good value here, especially at essentially plus 200 on Nate Landwehr. Charrier is pretty good. I mean, he's relatively physical for sure. He hits pretty hard. Well, I guess he really kicks pretty hard. He doesn't really have much boxing, but if Nate can get on that inside and look to wear down Morgan and look to utilize his own boxing, Nate's own boxing, I think that's really where he'll have success. And I think honestly he could find the victory by doing that in the end. But we'll see. But yeah, in my opinion, I think this is probably a decent bet for me. Then you have Calvin Kattar versus Steve Garcia. This is an interesting one. I mean, Calvin Kattar is a more slick boxer out of the two guys. I know Calvin is kind of on a drought as of late. He took a lot of damage in the Max Holloway fight. That was a long time at this point, but he took a lot of damage in that fight. He lost a very close split decision to, I believe it was a split decision to, oh man, I just had his name in my face, in my brain, and I just forgot it. I'm picturing his face. I just can't remember his name for some reason. The guy who survived against Ilya Tapor. I can't remember his name. But anyways, he lost a very close split decision to him. And also in his most recent fight, he took a pretty dominant loss to Aljamain Sterling. But it was a completely different style. Aljo was looking to only wrestle. It's not like Aljo really landed too much damage on Calvin, but he was able to get the victory in the end. But, even outside of all those losses that Calvin has had as of late, this is a completely different matchup for him. And I honestly don't mind the spot at plus money for Calvin. Calvin is probably going to be the slicker boxer out of the two. His chin has always been amazing. And I don't think it's going to be much of a problem in this fight. Steve does hit pretty hard. He also does push a real pace. So, Calvin's going to need to look to avoid shots for sure. But at the same time, I think he'll be able to take some shots from Steve. So, the slicker boxer, really good chin as well. And although as of late, things didn't really go his way, at the end of the day, I still kind of like the spot Calvin's in this fight, and I wouldn't mind taking the plus money on that one. As I touched upon before, not a super confident bet or anything like that, but I don't honestly mind the Wonder Boy bet plus 300. You put a little bit down on it, nothing too crazy. If I had to, regardless of odds, if I had to pick the fight, I would go with Gabriel Bonfim. But at the same time, I see a real world where Wonder Boy is able to survive on the feet early, maybe look to gas out Gabriel a little bit by stopping takedowns and maybe landing some shots on the feet, maybe some body kicks as well on the feet. And, essentially, if Wonder Boy is able to stop takedowns, I think he'll be able to win the fight. But of course, that is a big if. Wonder Boy has been taken down a bunch throughout his UFC career. Gabriel Bonfim is also very physical, as I touched upon before, on his shots, as well as even on the feet. He also hits pretty hard. So definitely a lot of weapons coming back at Wonder Boy's way, but I think he could win. There's a world where he wins. And then for this main event, Taliesin versus Derek Lewis, I'm certainly leaning with Taliesin pretty heavily, but at minus 280, there's not really any value there to bet it, unless, TKO or something you want to do that. But even then, it's not going to be great value. At this point on Tuesday, the odds are not even out yet. But yeah, so those are kind of the bets I like, just going over it. I like Cheaty at minus 158. I think that's a decent bet. I also like Nate Landwehr at plus 196. I also like Calvin Kattar at plus 102. Possibly Wonder Boy, very slight amount on Wonder Boy at plus 300. And yeah, that's really it. I mean, maybe for props, I'll find some other things I like. Maybe for, a parlay, something I wouldn't mind is Taliesin. As I said, very confident in him. Maybe a Taliesin Chris Curtis parlay at minus 126, possibly. Or maybe a Taliesin and Cheaty parlay at plus 121, possibly. You can work out which sort of parlays you would potentially like involving Taliesin, because Taliesin is probably my anchor for this upcoming weekend. I think he's in a pretty good spot. I think he's going to be able to get a victory in the end. But yeah, so that's kind of what I think for this upcoming card. And yeah, so that's what we have there. Let's full screen this quickly. But yeah, what else we got? We obviously have the White House card. I noticed that your channel could use some benefit. Okay. We also obviously have the potential White House card. We'll see how that pans out. I know Rick was in the chat earlier talking about that he doesn't think it's going to be able to work out as an outdoor event, which is honestly probably fair. I mean, we'll see how they do it. Maybe they'll have some sort of a top. Listen, Dan has always talked about the fact that he hates doing outdoor events, and the UFC has obviously never done one, at least not to my knowledge, an outdoor event. And he's been pretty hard set on that. He's passed up on many opportunities to go to stadiums in the past, potentially good opportunities for the UFC because of the uncertainty of the weather. Obviously, if you're outside, it can rain on a given day. You can't really plan these things out, 6 or 7 months out. So there definitely will be a lot of question marks with this potential White House card. What are the logistics of it? What does it look like and all that? But maybe the UFC's, has plans in their head to deal with potential weather-related issues, but we'll see what happens there. But obviously, they'll be praying for a pretty nice day on that day. But yeah, I mean, outside of that, we got good cards coming. I kind of touched a little bit about UFC 318, the Whitaker DeRitter card. That's going to be a really good one. Honestly, I mean, listen, Robert Whitaker has been really good throughout his career. Obviously, he's one of the best middleweights of all time. But in my opinion, I feel like, I don't know, though. There's a sense of me that's starting to feel like he could be a little bit over the hill slightly. I mean, he hasn't really shown too many examples of that. He lost to Khamzat Chimaev in his last fight, but it's Khamzat Chimaev. just a ridiculous wrestler. And even in that fight, Whitaker was able to stop some takedowns. And unfortunately, his teeth kind of gave in, and Hamzat was able to find the finish that way. And before that, he was able to beat, yeah, it's just going through some of Whitaker's more recent fights. Before the Hamzat fight, he was able to beat Ikram Aliskerov. And before that, he lost to Dricus. But I don't know. I don't know. I kind of just feel like RDR is gonna pull this one off. Of course, Whitaker has really good takedown defense. Of course, on the feet, he's probably going to be better than RDR. But it's kind of similar to Dricus. I think RDR kind of has that weird way to just be effective. On the feet, he's going to have like awkward striking that Whitaker's probably never seen before. But for whatever reason, I feel like it could be effective. And if the fight, gets in the clinch, I think RDR is going to have an advantage there. If the fight goes to the ground, I definitely think RDR is going to have an advantage there. Throughout, Ritter's career with the UFC, um, with his career with the UFC and with even ONE FC before he was with the UFC. He's done a really good job at just getting takedowns and finding finishes on the ground or just holding position on the ground and just finding victories at the end of the day. So I kind of feel like he's gonna it's not going to look perfect. It's not going to look super pretty, but at the end of the day, I think RDR is going to be able to find a victory. Take Whitaker down eventually, maybe get him in the clinch, loosen him up with some elbows and close, maybe some body knees and close, and then eventually be able to find a takedown and have success that way. That's kind of how I see the fight going. I know RDR is currently an underdog, so potentially could be a good value there if you're interested in a potential RDR ticket. But yeah, it's kind of how I see it. And then obviously in the co-main event of that card, we have Movsar Evloev versus Aaron Pico. I talked about this a few times already on stream, but I personally think this is probably going to be the main event or the number one contenders fight at featherweight. We previously thought that Yair Rodriguez was going to get the title shot for Volkanovski. And I guess theoretically that still could happen, but there's been rumors and reports saying that Yair actually has a fight booked already against a contender at featherweight. So it seems like this is going to be the number one contender fight. I always thought it should have been. I honestly thought that Movsar probably should have gotten the title shot even before fighting Aaron Pico, but at the very least, it seems like if Movsar wins this fight, he's going to get a title shot versus Volkanovski. Obviously, if Pico wins, he's probably going to get a title shot as well. That would be pretty crazy to get to the UFC, get a number one contenders fight just like that immediately, and potentially being able to beat Movsar Evloev, who's undefeated, 19-0, and has kind of been a boogeyman at 145. He's essentially beaten almost everybody. Or I wouldn't say almost everybody, but he's beaten a lot of guys at 145, and although he doesn't have finishes, he's still able to win, and in some of his fights in pretty dominant fashion. So we'll see what happens in that. I slightly lean towards Evloev, but I think Pico is very live. He's very dangerous. He has good wrestling, obviously, and on the feet, as I said, he's a really dangerous fighter, has a lot of power. So we'll see what Aaron Pico could do in his UFC debut. As of late, we kind of saw a mixed bag of UFC debuts. Michael Chandler's UFC debut was good. Some other guys didn't have great UFC debuts. Like Patchy Mix, his UFC debut was really bad. So we'll see how Aaron Pico looks in his UFC debut. But for whatever reason, I feel like he's going to look pretty good. Then we have Shara versus Marc-Andre Barrio. This is an interesting one. I'm like notoriously not high on Shara. I've made videos in the past talking about how I thought he was going to get fraud checked a couple different times. I was right against MVP, but I was wrong against some other opponents. But what Shara does well in the feet is keep range and utilize kicks. If he's able to keep range from his opponents, he's going to have success. He's going to be able to land leg kicks, land body kicks, and land head kicks. He does do a pretty good job at mixing things up. But the reason why I'm really not high on Shara whatsoever is Shara doesn't really have good defense, A, but also B, he doesn't have good boxing whatsoever. If you're able to get inside boxing range, Shara's really not going to have a lot of success against you. And I think if Marc-Andre Barrio was able to do that, he honestly could have success against Shara. If he's able to get Shara's back alongside the cage, maybe he can land some big shots. I mean, Marc-Andre Barrio is coming off a pretty big KO finish over Bruno Silva. I mean, obviously, Shara is significantly better than Bruno Silva, especially this version of Bruno Silva, which, in my opinion, I hope he retires. That was a pretty bad finish, but still. Is Shara going to win against Marc-Andre Barriault? Probably, but I do at the same time think there are some paths to victory for Marc-Andre. Then after that, we have Bogdan Guskov versus Nikita Krylov. This is a pretty good fight. In my opinion, I always thought Krylov was pretty good, but in his last fight versus Dominic Reyes, he kind of fought like very stupid, where he kind of just ran into a counterpuncher and he got counterpunched and he got finished. We'll see how he looks. I mean, relatively quick turnaround for Krylov after taking that TKO, but it wasn't that bad of a TKO. So we'll see how he looks. Hopefully, he has a smarter game plan going into this fight against Guskov, another striker. So we'll see how he does in that one. Outside of that, we have Almabayev versus Tamirov. I believe Tamirov is actually out, and it's replaced by somebody. I don't remember who the replacement is, but it is replaced by someone. But pretty good fighter, Almabayev at flyweight. We'll see how he looks. But yeah, it does kind of suck. Tamirov versus Almabayev, I thought was going to be a pretty good fight for the flyweight division. Then we have Ibo Islam versus Billy Alqueda. I've seen Billy fight before. He's really not good at all. He's like relatively athletic, I guess, but he kind of just shies away from punches. He doesn't have too much technique, and I think Ibo is going to get the victory. I do think that Ibo is a little bit of a fraud. I mean, he did lose in his last fight, but I don't think Billy's the guy that's going to beat him. So I definitely lean with Ibo in that fight. Then we have Peter Yan versus Marcus McGee. Really weird matchmaking, but I think probably what happened here was Peter Yan, probably is going to get the next title shot after Corey Sandhagen. And I think what the UFC was thinking, or what Peter Yan was thinking, I should say, is he doesn't want to wait that long until the UFC puts together the Corey Sandhagen fight. And then he would have to wait a little bit longer, obviously, to give Merab or Corey some time to rest before Peter Yan would fight next. So I think what Peter Yan and probably what the UFC agreed to as well is just get him in there now. There's a lot of guys that were, maybe not willing to fight Peter Yan at this point, or were booked with some other fights. So they just did Peter Yan versus Marcus McGee. I definitely think Peter Yan's going to win this fight. I think he's going to, kind of style on Marcus McGee a little bit. I think he honestly has an advantage in all areas of MMA. But, we'll see what happens in this fight. Marcus does have a decent amount of power, so that's something that Peter does need to worry about. But in my opinion, Peter Yan has shown a really good chin, and he's just going to be better. So I definitely think Peter's going to win that fight, but we'll see what happens to that one. Then we have Bryce Mitchell moving down to bantamweight. I actually think this is probably a good move for him. I always thought Bryce was a little bit small for 145. We saw that in some of his performances, just, kind of getting outworked by Gene Silva. I mean, Gene Silva is obviously a great fighter, and he outworks most guys. But, just being able to stop everything against Bryce, I think that really had an effect on Bryce moving down to bantamweight. Of course, I talk about this a lot, but of course, when guys move weight classes, move up or move down, there's always those question marks to see how they're going to look at that new weight class. Like for Bryce, how's his speed going to be at bantamweight? Are guys going to be significantly faster than him? How is Bryce's cardio going to hold up now that he's cutting, 10 more pounds than he's normally used to? How's his chin going to look at 135? Of course, there's a lot of questions. And against a pretty explosive guy like Said Nurmagomedov, of course, a lot of those things are going to be tested. His chin, his potential cardio, how fast he's going to be. All those things are going to be tested in this fight. But with all that being said, I do think there is a real path to victory for Bryce. I think Bryce is going to be able to take down Nurmagomedov, and I think he's going to be able to hold him down, honestly. So I would lean with Bryce in that fight. But definitely an interesting one. Then after that, we have Davey Grant versus Damon Blackshear. Blackshear has done a really good job, honestly, at improving his game. He's really mostly known as a jiu-jitsu guy and a guy who has success on the ground, just a really good grappler. But as of late, he's done a really good job. I mean, his last performance, he really looked like a great striker out there. Really good kicks, decent boxing, was able to stay relatively safe, at least in his more recent performances. And just a pretty good career that Damon Blackshear is building for himself. For Davey Grant, I mean, he has some skill, I guess, but I would certainly lean pretty heavily in favor of Damon Blackshear in that one. And then we have Muhammad Yahya. I don't really know how this guy's still in the UFC. He doesn't really have anything, in my personal opinion. He doesn't hit hard. He's not really a good striker. He's definitely not a good grappler. Um, his cardio is fine, but he doesn't really do any damage, and he doesn't really have much skill, in my opinion. So it's kind of surprising to me why he's still in the UFC. Maybe because he's fighting out of the UAE, maybe, or out of I believe out of the UAE. So maybe that's why he's still in the UFC. But also the UFC tends to keep around guys that aren't that good just so they can match up some of their young up and comers against those fighters. So maybe that's another reason why he's still in the UFC. But as I said, in my opinion, I don't think he's very good. Um, and yeah, I mean, that's what the card looks like for the Whitaker versus RDR card. Definitely an interesting one. Probably, pretty good one. But, we'll see what happens there. But yeah, I mean, a lot of interesting things coming up. I won't see. My bad. But yeah, I mean, a lot of interesting things coming up. Obviously, we have a couple cards coming up this upcoming weekend. We do have a card coming back. We didn't really have any fights this previous weekend, so it's nice to get back to fights. And yeah, I mean, I've talked about this a few times. The UFC, I think, is honestly in a pretty decent spot at this point. There is some excitement around certain fights. There is some excitement around certain fights and around certain fighters. But we'll see what the UFC is able to put together. I think there's some fun cards that are upcoming. It'll be interesting to see if a Conor McGregor or John Jones or whoever else actually does decide to come to the UFC or come back to the UFC and fight at this White House card that people are talking about. But we'll see what happens. Obviously, there's also some news that came out recently about Shavkat talking about how he's not going to fight for the interim belt. We'll see what happens. Shavkat's career, in my opinion, is pretty unfortunate, at least at this point. Of course, he's not retired, and of course, he's probably still at his peak. But in my opinion, it kind of sucks because when he's out there, he's a really good fighter. A lot of finishes, a ton of finishes, and I believe he has all finishes on his record, or no. Ian Gary was able to survive against him. But outside of the Ian Gary fight, he's 100% finish rate. And in the Ian Gary fight, he was able to beat Ian in a pretty close fight. But when he's out there, he looks really good. The problem with Shavkat, though, is he just gets injured way too much. It seems like after every fight, he requires a surgery. And after his Ian Gary fight, it was no different. He had to get surgery again. It's just unfortunate. He's a really good fighter. It seems to be that he's just pretty fragile out there. And, hopefully he can figure out some of these injury issues. A lot of times when guys deal with injuries, they don't usually shake that. But, maybe Shavkat will be able to be a little bit more healthy, maybe train in a different way, maybe make some lifestyle changes that will help him be a little bit more healthy. But at the end of the day, there's nothing really guaranteed, and we'll see what happens. But for Shavkat, his next fight could easily be for the belt. I mean, it was supposed to be for the belt, but he had to pull out of the Bilal fight with an injury. JDM got that title shot instead. JDM ended up beating Bilal, and he's the current champion. And now he's fighting Islam Makhachev next. So pretty crazy how injuries and subtle differences and subtle changes could really have such a huge effect on the UFC. Jack Della Maddalena is the champion at this point because of that. So, it's interesting to see. We'll see what happens with the career of Jack Della Maddalena and as well as Shavkat Rakhmonov. But yeah, we'll see who he fights next. In my opinion, I know Shavkat said he's not fighting for an interim belt or he's not fighting any non-contenders. But in my opinion, I think he's probably going to have to fight for a number one contender fight or an interim belt potentially. Most likely a number one contenders fight, just because Islam is moving up to 170, so he's kind of like cutting the line. I mean, he deserves it, a belt, a title shot, immediate title shot, 170. But yeah, I mean, he's kind of like cutting the line, I guess. So now Shavkat and some other guys at that weight class are going to have to wait a little bit longer. So because of that, I think it's very justifiable to put together a Shavkat Rakhmonov or somebody else at that weight class just to get, just to get some more action and potentially a more deserving number one contender at that point or after the Islam fight. But yeah, just looking at let's look at the rankings And let's take a peek to see who we can possibly matchmake here. So Shavkat is currently the number 3 ranked guy. As I said, he did get a previous title shot versus Bilal, but he had to pull out via injury. But I mean, from some previous, it doesn't happen all the time, but some previous examples in the past of guys that got title shots, got injured, and had to pull out, was Charles Oliveira. I mean, he had a fight scheduled against Islam Makhachev for the title, and he had to pull out. This was his rematch against Islam after beating what's his face, Beneil Dariush. But yeah, so he had to fight again though before he got his next title shot. So for Shavkat, I do think he's probably going to need to fight one more time before he gets a title shot. Who is he going to fight? I mean, you could do Shavkat versus Sean Brady. There's a lot of options, honestly. Shavkat versus Sean Brady, I think would make sense. Both of these guys are on win streaks. Both of these guys are definitely on the up and up. And doing a Sean Brady versus Shavkat, whoever wins that fight could easily get a title shot. I think it's very justifiable for both of those guys. Outside of that, you could do Shavkat versus Bilal. I heard some rumors of that potential fight, and I think that makes sense as well. The only thing I would say, though, is like if Shavkat beats Bilal, of course he'll get a title shot. But if Bilal beats Shavkat, I don't know if he's going to get a title shot. Maybe he'll have to fight one more time just because he just fought Jack Della Maddalena, and if Jack beats Islam, I don't think they're going to do that rematch right away, in my opinion. Or if Islam beats Jack Della Maddalena, I don't think Bilal and Islam are going to want to fight each other. So then it becomes interesting to see what Bilal would potentially do. Does he move up potentially? I don't know. There would be options for him, but it would be interesting. So if I had to matchmake for welterweight, we already have JDM and Islam, so that's already a thing. I would personally do Shavkat versus Sean Brady. I think that's what I would do. Then I would do Bilal versus Kamaru Usman. They have the bad blood. They're both former champions. And also, just a personal thing, it would be pretty cool to see Kamaru Usman potentially get another title shot again. And I think against a guy like Bilal, Kamaru could definitely beat him. So I would do that. Then I would probably do Leon Edwards versus maybe Leon versus Ian Gary, something like that. I believe they were scheduled to fight already in the past. And, I think it was supposed to be JDM versus Leon. So, but maybe they were scheduled at a different point. But I would personally do that. Leon versus Ian Gary. The fight itself might not be that great. Both these guys are kind of counter strikers. Leon more so than Ian. But I would probably put that fight together. And then I'd probably put a guy like Michael Morales in there against Leon Edwards if the Ian Gary fight doesn't work out. I think Morales is going to be a guy who's going to be really good at the welterweight division. In terms of his skill, I think he's decently skilled on the feet, to be honest. He has a good jab. He has a decent left straight. But the real reason why I think Michael Morales is going to be so good out there is because of his physical tools. He has a ridiculous reach. He has a really good chin. He hits like ridiculously hard. He's also significantly bigger than anybody at welterweight, so he's going to have that advantage. And even, some things that people would say maybe would be a weakness for him really aren't, to be honest. He's really hard to take down, and even in the few occasions that we did see him get taken down, he was able to get right back up because he has, good enough technique, paired with the fact that he's so much bigger than everybody else at welterweight, that he's able to utilize that strength and utilize that ability to literally just get back up. So I think Michael Morales is going to be a champion at welterweight. I definitely do think that. And I think we're going to be seeing a lot of impressive performances from Michael Morales going forward. Now, who does he fight next? As I said, you could certainly match him up against Leon Edwards, or, it really could be anybody. Anybody ahead of him, I would say, for Morales. And I think he would beat almost everybody there. I think he would beat Ian Gary. I think he's just too long and probably too powerful. I think he would beat Kamaru Usman. As good as Usman is, I think he's just a little bit too old at this point. The takedowns, we'll see how Morales is able to deal with the takedowns of Usman. But for the most part, I think he'll be able to stop them and get back up if he is taken down. Leon Edwards versus Michael Morales, I definitely would lean with Morales. Shavkat versus Michael Morales. Honestly, I think I would lean with Morales as well, just because on the feet, Shavkat is a little bit open. And I think Morales could take shots from Shavkat, but I don't know if the opposite is true. I don't know if Shavkat could take shots from Morales. So You know, I think I honestly would. This is a close fight for sure, but I think I would honestly lean towards Morales. Then Morales for Sean Brady, I think could be a nightmare fight for Sean Brady. Brady has has a decent ability to take guys down. When he takes guys down, that's really where he has a lot of success, and he's really hard to get back up from if he does take you down. But his takedowns aren't amazing, and I think Morales will be able to stop takedowns. And if he's stuck on the feet against Morales, it's a nightmare. I mean, Sean Brady got finished once upon a time by Bilal Muhammad on the feet. So I think Morales will be a real test and a real challenge for Brady. And then Bilal, I definitely would lean with Michael Morales against him. So I basically favor Morales against everybody ahead of him at the welterweight division. And I think this guy is going to be very good. You know, we have Dricus, I mean, the champion of the middleweight division, perfect example of this. Physicality is just super important. Some guys just have another level of physicality, and I think Dricus is one of those guys, and I think Morales is one of those guys as well. Of course, you do have to have talent on top of that, but if you're super physical, you're just going to have a natural advantage over most of your opponents. And guys like that, I think, tend to be top 5 guys or potentially even champions. Just looking through some of these weight classes, let me just bring this up quickly. Just looking through some of these weight classes, you talk about flyweight, Pantoja. He's very physical. I mean, there's an argument to be made. He's the most physical guy at flyweight. Hits really hard, can take guys, when he takes guys down, he's very physical as well, has a really good chin. So definitely physicality. For Merab, he's also pretty physical, not in the same way as I would consider most guys to be physical, as he doesn't hit that hard, obviously, but he's very strong. A lot of guys that went up against him talk about how strong he is in the clinch and going for takedowns. Sean O'Malley has talked about that in length, as well as some other guys that he went up against as well. And his cardio is just on another level. So I definitely do think that Merab is very physical. Alexander Volkanovski, I would say, is the exception. He's actually not that physical, but he's just so talented and so skilled that I think he's able to get away with it. But outside of that, Topuria, obviously another level of physicality. He hits ridiculously hard. He can take a shot really, really well. His wrestling, he's very powerful in the wrestling as well. JDM, I would say, is pretty physical as well. Hits pretty hard, can certainly take a shot really well. Dricus is one of the more, durable and one of the more physical guys in the entire UFC. Magomed, I would say, is relatively physical as well. Tom Aspinall is on another level of physicality. So just quickly looking through some of these champions at the in the UFC, most of these guys outside of Volkanovski, and even for Volkanovski, I mean, he's very strong in the wrestling, but in terms of his punching power, in terms of his chin, it's not necessarily the best. So outside of Volkanovski, all of these guys are super physical, with the most physical guys in the UFC probably being Ilya, Dricus, and Tom Aspinall, at least for current champions. I think Michael Morales is on that list, but of course he's not there yet. He's not a champion, and he's not even a top 5 guy yet. So we'll see how his career pans out. But yeah, I mean, physicality is just very, very important, and I think we're starting to see it more and more from some of these top guys. I mean, most of the guys in the UFC are really good, and especially when you talk about top 5 guys in each division, all those guys are very good. I just think the differentiating factor is certainly skill. I mean, skill has different levels, of course, and when you look at the champions, obviously they're more skillful, most likely, than essentially everybody in the rankings. But also, I think the other differentiating factor, which is a pretty big one, a pretty important one, is that physicality. And yeah, that's why I think it's so important. But yeah. So I mean, we could just quickly do like a little bit of a matchmaking thing, and you guys can let me know in chat if you guys agree or not. But for flyweight, we'll start at flyweight. We already did some matchmaking for welterweight, so we'll skip over that. But going in order from flyweight, of course, we already have our main event, or championship fight, I should say, set already with Pantoja versus Joshua Van. That's going to be a banger. I'm going to make a video about this pretty soon, probably coming out in the next week or so, talking about how I think Pantoja, or Joshua Van, I should say, is Pantoja's toughest test yet. I think Pantoja is obviously ridiculously good. On the feet, he has skill. He hits really hard. He has really good body kicks. And on the ground, he's lights out. He submits essentially everybody that he goes up against. But outside of that, I think Joshua Van has a real chance to potentially have success in this fight. I think on the feet, he's going to be a significantly better boxer. Van has shown an ability to beat top level guys already. He just beat Brandon Royval, who's a number one contender, number two contender. I think he's the number one contender going into the fight, currently now being at number three. Um, and yeah, so I think Joshua Van is a real chance. John, what's going on, brother? Throw your comment on the screen quickly. What's going on? What's going on? Welcome to the stream. So yeah, so we already have that that fight set. We have then I would probably do Brandon Moreno versus Brandon Royval, the trilogy. They both have a win against each other, and both of them have kind of talked about a potential fight between each other for the trilogy, and they've both accepted it. So we'll see how that goes. But I think that I would agree with that matchmaking, Moreno versus Royval. Put that fight together. And for other fights, I probably would do Kai Kara-France versus Manel Kape. I think that's a really fun fight to put together. The thing about flyweight is I think there's actually a couple of different guys who can get the title shot after Joshua Van. It could be Brandon Moreno. It could be, I guess theoretically, it could be Brandon Royval, but more likely, I think it would either be Brandon Moreno or Manel Kape. If some other guys could surprise us and jump in there, but in my opinion, though, it's probably going to be one of those two guys that get it next. I think Kape has a lot of momentum and a real chance to get the title shot next. But of course, he's going to have to fight again. So if they do Brandon Moreno versus Brandon Royval, I do like that fight. But at the same time, maybe you would do a Brandon Moreno versus Manel Kape as a number one contender fight. Just to make things a little bit more simple. Because if you do Moreno versus Royval and Moreno wins, and then you do, let's say, KKF versus Kape and Kape wins, who gets the title shot there? It probably would be Kape just because Moreno already lost 3 separate times to Pantoja. But still, it would complicate things a little bit. And maybe we would just like to see the best fight the best, because I do believe Moreno and Kape are probably the two best guys outside of, Pantoja and possibly even Joshua Van at the flyweight division. So that's what I would personally like to see. I've been seeing a lot of you. But yeah, so outside of that, I mean, we really have some other matchmaking going on. Alex Perez is supposed to fight Steve Erceg, so that'll be an interesting one. I think for Steve, this is a very winnable fight, a fight he's probably going to win, and we'll see. So I know Kaya Sakura has a fight coming up next against Tim Elliott. I think Kai is going to win that fight. Also, a winnable fight for him. And yeah, listen. Flyweight gets a lot of hate because, they're small. There's really not too many finishes. But when you look at the top of the weight class, there's a lot of excitement. Pantoja gets a finish in essentially every one of his fights, which is extremely rare and extremely impressive for 125 pounds. Outside of that, Joshua Van is a really exciting fighter. He's kind of a newcomer to the UFC a little bit. So that's really exciting. Brandon Royval is always an exciting fighter. KKF, I mean, he's a pretty exciting fighter as well. Of course, has that knockout power. Tatsuda Taira is, always an interesting fighter to watch. Manel Kape is an exciting guy. Almabayev is an exciting guy. Steve Erceg is an exciting guy. Kaya Sakura, in my opinion, is an exciting guy as well. So I don't know. I think Flyweight's in a pretty good state at this point. They have a really good champion. They have a lot of really good contenders, and we'll see how everything pans out going forward from there. But definitely a lot of potential things to do at flyweight. Then moving on to the bantamweight division, we have Merab versus Corey Sandhagen. That's already set for the championship fight of that weight class. Outside of that, we also have Peter Yan and Marcus McGee fighting. For whatever reason, I kind of talked about this before. I think they're putting this fight together because Yan is expecting to get the next title shot after Corey, but he has to fight one more time to get that title shot, and maybe nobody was available or nobody wanted to fight Peter Yan or whatever the reason was. So I think they just kept going down the rankings, kept going down the list until they got to Marcus McGee, and Marcus accepted the fight against Peter Yan. I think that's probably why this fight is getting put together. I don't really see any other reason outside of that. I don't know why the number 3 ranked guy would face the number 13th ranked guy, especially when there's not too much momentum behind Marcus McGee's name. But nonetheless, huge opportunity for Marcus McGee. And another fight to get another win under his belt for Peter Yan, and we'll see how that one pans out. But outside of that, in my opinion, I would like the UFC to put together a fight between Umar and Sean O'Malley. I think that's a good one. Two guys that went up against Merab, both lost title fights, but are still both guys that are pretty high in the rankings. In my opinion, it's kind of crazy how Sean O'Malley's still the number 1 ranked guy at the bantamweight division. I think he probably should be a little bit lower. But nonetheless, I would personally like to see them put this fight together, Sean O'Malley versus Umar. The only thing is, if Sean wins, obviously you can't give him another title shot. And if Umar wins, I mean, maybe you can give Umar another title shot, but he did lose to Merab in his last fight. So I would personally like to see both Sean and Umar fight another time before they get a title shot. For Corey Sandhagen and Peter Yan, they're, of course, taken up. For Deiveson Figueiredo, he did just tear his ACL or tear something in his knee. I believe it was his ACL. So he's going to be out for a while, so I'm not going to count him. For Song Yadong, he's coming off a victory over Henry Cejudo. So for him, I mean, you probably would like to see a guy like Song Yadong fight somebody ahead of him in the rankings, but I think a lot of these guys are going to be taken. I think Corey Sandhagen, he's already fighting for the belt. Peter Yan's already fighting. Umar's free. But I don't know if you do an Umar versus Sean Yadong fight. I think it more likely would be an Umar versus Sean O'Malley fight. So we'll see what happens there. And then Sean O'Malley, as I said, I would personally like to see these two guys matched up against each other. So for Song Yadong, he might have to fight back in the rankings. Maybe do a rematch between Song Yadong and Chito Vera. Song won the first time, but I personally think Chito won that fight. Should have won that fight. I thought he got robbed, actually. So maybe you put that fight back together. Also, a weird performance, or weird stoppage, weird ending in Song Yadong's last fight versus Cejudo. So maybe he fights a little bit back in the rankings, and that's totally fine. So that's what I would personally do. And for some of these other guys, I mean, a guy like Henry Cejudo, maybe he retires, maybe gets one more fight against a lower level guy, maybe goes out on a win, or maybe just retires right away. We'll see what happens for him. But yeah, just to reiterate, matchmaking that I would like to see at bantamweight: Sean O'Malley versus Umar. I would like to see Song Yadong versus Chito Vera. And outside of that, I mean, most of these guys already have fights booked. So that's what I would personally like to see. Then moving on to the featherweight division, I think this is probably what the UFC is doing, but I would also do this if I were the UFC. So you have Evloev versus Pico. I would make that the number 1 contenders fight. As I said, I think that's what's happening. I think that's what the UFC is looking to do and thinking about. So I would do that for the number 1 contenders fight. You already have Diego Lopez versus Gene Silva. That's going to be a pretty good one. Max Holloway is the number 1 contender at featherweight, but I don't think he has any intention of moving back down to featherweight, so I'm not going to count him. Yair Rodriguez and Arnold Allen are rumored to be fighting each other, which is good in my opinion, because I don't want to see Yair Rodriguez get a title shot right away, coming off a pretty lackluster performance. Even though it was a win, pretty lackluster performance in his last one, and it is only a 1-fight win streak. So it seems like he's taken. Ortega and Aljo are also taken. Danny Ige is taken. Calvin Kattar's booked. There's a lot of guys actually that already have fights booked at the featherweight division, but if I had to make some fights, I guess Lerone Murphy's available. Maybe do Lerone Murphy versus. I mean, I personally would like. This is not going to happen because I don't think Max is moving back down to featherweight. But I would personally like to see a Lerone Murphy versus Max Holloway fight. I think that makes sense. Lerone is, he's on a win streak. He's coming off a win over Josh Emmett. Maybe fight somebody ahead of him in the rankings. Pretty big jump to the number 1 contender from number 7. But Lerone has some pretty good momentum behind him, and I wouldn't mind seeing a fight like that. But as I said, I don't think Max is going to fight at 145 anymore. So maybe for Lerone, you could do Lerone versus Youssef Zalal, maybe. I mean, for Lerone, he's fighting back in the rankings, and he's fighting a pretty good guy in Youssef Zalal. But I think that's probably what I would do. But yeah, as I said, most of the fights are already booked for featherweight, so not too much matchmaking there. For everybody joining in late to the stream, we're doing We're doing matchmaking here. Um, Big Unc, what's going on, brother? Welcome to the stream. It's going pretty good. It's going pretty good. Fire up your comment there. Um, but did you see all the announcements for what? For Big Marcel? No, I didn't see the announcements. What happened? What happened? Let me know. Let me know. Um, but yeah. So just quickly, just doing some matchmaking for the lightweight division. I personally would probably do a number one contenders fight between Justin Gaethje and Paddy Pimblett. I think that's probably the fight to make, at least in my opinion. Listen, I don't think the three guys that could potentially get a title shot versus Ilya next could be Arman Tsarukyan, Justin Gaethje, or Paddy Pimblett. And out of those three guys, I don't really think anybody deserves a title shot. Glad to be in a stream. The guy isn't talking about Lucas Tracy's goal list. I actually didn't even see that. Did he come out with a GOAT list recently and it wasn't great? What was his GOAT list? If you don't mind typing it in. It's pretty funny, actually. Very nice, Big Unc. Nice little walk outside. That's always good. Get some cardio in. See the nice outdoors. Shows how boring a man is nowadays. Yeah, that's pretty funny, actually. Yeah, I mean, listen, when good events are coming up, there's a lot to talk about, but when there's no events coming up, there's really not much to talk about, and people resort to whatever they can think of, honestly. So yeah, I mean, it could be tough, but that is pretty funny that a lot of people are they're reacting to his GOAT list. But yeah. He did a top 50 GOAT list, and it was a decent list. Okay. That's pretty funny. All right, so we're gonna do a reaction to Lucas Tracy's GOAT list. I'm just kidding. But that's funny. I mean, YouTube's always fun. Yeah. That's a fair point, honestly. That's a fair point, Big Unc. Yeah, he's just putting out his opinion. Who really cares? But yeah, that's pretty funny, actually. But yeah, just talking about the lightweight division, as I was saying, I personally think they should do a number one contenders fight between Gaethje and Paddy. There were some rumors about this fight potentially happening. You know, for UFC 319, but that was shot down, and we'll see what the UFC decides to do. But yeah, I hate the GOATless combo so much. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I don't know. Who do you think is the GOAT in your opinion, or do you just hate that that people talk about it all the time? No, it's a very obviously it's a very opinionative kind of thing. But yeah, what are you gonna do? Everybody has different opinions. How do you have so entertaining? Same vibes top of the list. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, I think it's pretty widely well known at top 5, top 10 kind of guys. Everybody basically has the same guys on the list. Maybe someone's going to try to get some views or try to be shocking to you know to gain more attention and add somebody who probably shouldn't be on that list. But for the most part, I probably would agree with you, John. All right, let's just full screen this, honestly. I would probably agree with you, John, that it's basically the same fighters. The actual way the list is worded out or whatever maybe could be slightly different, but for the most part, it's the same top 5, top 10 guys. So I agree. You're really not learning anything too new, honestly. But yeah, and like everyone has their own criteria, and how can you compare two guys if one's weight class different areas of different competition? It's tough. It definitely is tough. It is tough. it's even hard to make a pound for pound list at this point. I think, in my opinion, I probably would agree with what the UFC has at this point. But it is tough to compare guys in different weight classes, and especially now when you're adding the extra element of comparing guys who are also fought in different eras. It does become very difficult to do. Um, so yeah. But to answer your question, I would say my goats include Islam, Jones, and Khabib. That's fair. That's fair. I think. I mean, listen, your goes. Yeah, I would agree that all those guys should be on the list. I personally think John Jones is probably the goat in my opinion, but he's on PEDs, and as you said, everybody has different criteria on how they determine goats. But for Khabib, I certainly think he's on a top 5 list. And for Islam, he probably is as well, but he's I guess he's not as dominant as Khabib was. He's dominant in terms of he's beating everybody, and he is getting finishes. But in terms of the fights themselves, Khabib was, it would appear at least, was on another level. But Islam certainly is a great, and he's still fighting. So let's see if he's able to get the second belt, which there is a real possibility that he is able to, which will only enhance. Him being on that GOAT list, and he would also do something that Khabib didn't do, becoming a 2-time champion or 2 division champion. So yeah, that'll be interesting to see. The usual GSP, Jones, and Mighty Mouse. I would agree with that. Also, Mighty Mouse is so overrated in my opinion. I mean, the thing about Mighty Mouse is I personally think that Pantoja is right there in terms of the GOAT of 125 with Mighty Mouse. Because the thing about Mighty Mouse is he has a ton of title defenses. Oh, I just saw some lightning outside. But he has a ton of title defenses. But when you talk about the level of competition that he went up against, it's not the same as the guys right now at 125. So there is that different element to it. That he beat a lot of guys, he finished a lot of guys, and he has a ton of title defenses. It's going to be really hard to break that record. But also, when you talk about the guys, the level of guys he fought, they're not nearly the same as what they are now. Pantoja has beaten, significantly better fighters. I mean, just looking at some of the guys that Pantoja has beaten over the years, he's beaten Brandon Moreno 3 separate times. He beat Brandon Royval. He beat Kai Kara France twice. He beat Manel Kopp. He beat Alex Perez. He beat Steve Urseg. He beat Kai Sakura. There's just so many guys that he beat, and most of these guys that I'm mentioning, he beat more than once. I mean, beating Moreno 3 separate times is honestly like a ridiculous accomplishment. So yeah. So I kind of see what you're saying, honestly, in terms of that. Islam, I think, deserves to be on the top list for GOAT status. Yeah, that's fair. We'll see what he's able to do against JDM. If he's able to get that belt, I definitely think he'll be there. I think I would agree with you. Probably already he should be there. At what number in the GOAT list? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see when his career is all said and done. But he has done a lot of great things. I mean, he's beat Volkanovski, who's a legend, twice. I know he's a 145er, moved up, but regardless, that's a great win regardless of what weight class Volkanovski normally fights at. And also to finish him in the fashion that he was able to, I think is also really impressive. And as well as beating Charles Oliveira, beating some other guys along the way as well. Islam is definitely putting together a really impressive career. If Monfils beats Wonderboy, do you think the UFC will fast track him like Buckley? I think it would depend on how he finishes him. The thing about Bonfim is he does honestly have a pretty fan-friendly style. Um, I think he does have a pretty fan-friendly style, and I could see the UFC pushing him, but at the same time, he's not like a huge name at this point yet. So if he does beat Wonderboy, which I think he will, but with that being said, I think Wonderboy has a real chance, a possibility to win that fight as well if he's able to keep it on the feet, which is a big if. But if he is able to do that, I think it's possible they can fast track him. Let's quickly look just at the rankings. So for Bonfim. Let's see. Where's Wonderboy? So Wonderboy's 12, and obviously Bonfim's not ranked. With a win over Wonder Boy, I'm assuming Bonfim's going to be around 12 in the rankings, maybe 11. Fight after that, maybe they can put him up against a Colby Covington. Hey, listen, I think it depends on how he wins the fight and how he would how he would fare in his next fight. I could honestly see them putting him up against a guy like Colby Covington or somebody like that. A decent name, but for Colby, I think he's probably washed at this point. But a decent name nonetheless. And then we'll see how he performs in that fight. And I think that would really determine how quickly the UFC pushes him. But we'll see. I think he's pretty good. I mean, he's pretty physical. He hits pretty hard in the feet. On the ground, he has really good jiu-jitsu, really good submission skills. Yeah, so we'll see how he pans out. I saw someone live today talk about how Mighty Mouse wins don't include wins over the same guy, implying that's why he's weapon attention. I don't personally agree. And well, in my opinion, I actually think it's more impressive to beat the same guy multiple times as opposed to beating other guys. And I'll tell you why. It's not always true, but I think in the case of Pantoja, it is true. Just because when you talk about Pantoja beating guys more than one time, it means that those guys lost to Pantoja, but continued to rise in the rankings and beat other guys. Like, for example, a guy in Brandon Moreno has lost to Pantoja 3 separate times, yes, but he was a champion. And he was able to beat almost everybody outside of Pantoja and maybe Figueiredo when they had their little rivalry as well. But outside of that, Moreno was essentially beating everybody. So the fact that Pantoja was able to beat Moreno early on, when they kind of were relatively early on into their MMA careers, as well as 2 more times after that, and even beating him once to become the champion, or the 3rd time at least to become the champion, I think is more impressive than a guy like Mighty Mouse beating all different guys throughout his UFC career, or at least throughout his championship career. But if you're fighting different guys every fight, I feel like that kind of says that the division's not that great. It either means it's really good or it's not that great. But in my opinion, I feel like for Mighty Mouse's case, it means that his division was not that great. So that's kind of my thought process because, as I said, Moreno, I mean, that's a really good win. It's a guy who consistently gets right back to the top of the division, a guy who can certainly become a champion theoretically again. Brandon Royval, also a guy who just consistently beats most of the guys he goes up against. KKF KKF's not as good as the other two, but still, he's definitely a top 5 guy. Manel Kopp is in my opinion a guy who's pretty good. Steve Erceg, although he's taken a couple losses in a row, I think he's pretty good. So I guess I'm kind of saying it in a really long way, but I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you beat the same guy multiple times, not always, but generally, I think that's more impressive than beating a bunch of other guys. Because it's not like for Pantoja, he beat Moreno like 7 times, something ridiculous, and he didn't really beat anybody else. He beat like everybody, and he beat everybody multiple times, or almost everybody. He didn't fight Van yet because he just got to the UFC. We'll see how that goes. But outside of that, he's beaten everybody multiple times, or almost everybody multiple times. So in my opinion, that's more impressive because I kind of just think it shows longevity for some of the other guys he was able to beat. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what I personally think. But yeah, outside of that, what else we got? Also we have, it's kind of weird to see what the UFC decides to do with the light heavyweight division. I think there's a lot of potential matchups they can put together, but at the same time, the fact that Alex Pereira doesn't have a fight booked yet is kind of holding up the division to an extent. I mean, the next title fight at light heavyweight is going to be Magomed versus Alex Pereira, almost a guarantee. But the fact that we're kind of waiting for it there's some questions. Is Alex going to fight again? I mean, no, he's almost definitely going to fight again. But when is he going to fight again? I know Pereira has talked about potentially sitting out a little bit longer this time around as compared to other times, which he's definitely deserved the right to do. He's been ridiculously active in the past, but it's interesting to see when that fight will get put back together. But in my opinion, I kind of think Uncle Ive is just going to win again. whenever they put that fight back together. But at the same time, I think it's going to be a more interesting fight and probably a better performance from Alex the second time around as compared to the first. But with that being said, I think Magomed is just a little bit too defensively sound on the feet to get caught. Um, although anybody can get caught, obviously. And on the fence, I mean, he really wasn't able to take Alex down in the first fight, but he had a real advantage in the clinch, just getting it there alongside the cage, and he was able to just hold Alex there for a while. So I think there's just some built-in advantages that Magomed has, even going into the next fight. So we'll see how that pans out for sure. That's nothing. But yeah, but outside of the actual title fight, I think they should put a fight together between Yuri Prochazka and Khalil Roundtree. I mean, Roundtree fought relatively recently, so he's gonna probably want to sit out a little bit, although he didn't really take much damage against Jamal Hill at all. But I think a fight between Roundtree and Yuri would be really fun. I think that's a legitimate number one contenders fight, in my opinion. And yeah, I mean, for Yuri, if he's able to win, I think he has a real chance against Magomed. And if Khalil Roundtree is able to win, he's really doing a great job at pushing himself into title contention and building back up his name after losing that title fight to Pereira. So we'll see how that pans out. Other matchmaking, I would like to see Jamal Hill go up against Dominic Reyes. I think that's an interesting fight. For Dominic Reyes, he's on a win streak. He's putting some wins together nicely. And for Jamal Hill, he's on a 3-fight losing streak, but he's always dangerous. So I think that would be a good fight and a winnable fight for either guy, in my opinion. But it would be pretty cool, honestly, to see Dominic Reyes just continue on that win streak and potentially get close, or maybe even get a title shot. How crazy would that be? I think there's two guys that have a real chance to do something pretty special in Dominic Reyes as well as Kamaru Usman. For Usman, I mean, he was a champion for a long time. He takes the head kick, he gets knocked out. He takes a couple losses in a row after that versus Leon again and against Hamza Chimaev. But at this point, he has a real chance to, fight a number one contenders fight and potentially fight for the belt again, which is pretty crazy. And for Dominic Reyes is probably an even better story after fighting for the belt, losing against John Jones when a lot of people thought he should have won probably. But he didn't, and then his career kind of went downhill, taking all those TKO or KO losses in a row. And now at this point, putting a couple wins together, I think he's on a 3-fight win streak at this point, moving up the rankings, potentially fighting a guy like Jamal Hill next. And yeah. On the kick side, what's going on? Everything's good. How's your stream going? Stream's going well. But yeah, definitely a lot of interesting potential matchups at light heavyweight. In terms of contenders coming up from light heavyweight, I don't really think there's too many, honestly. It's probably just Big Bang, Zhang Mingzhang. I think he has a potential to be pretty good at the heavyweight division, at the light heavyweight division. But outside of him, I don't think anybody else is really a great contender. Maybe Azamat Murzakanov, he could be decent. But even him, I'm not super high on either, to be honest. So we'll see about potential contenders. But at the top of the light heavyweight division, I think there's some matchups you could put together, some fun fights. For middleweight, we already have Dricus and Hamzat. That's a really fun fight, really good fight. How long you been streaming? No, I'm not an affiliate, and I've been streaming for I've been streaming for like 2 weeks. It hasn't really been that long, honestly. Kind of just started streaming. But yeah, I mean, we just talk about MMA topics. We talk about some upcoming news or upcoming fights or whatever. I mean, this upcoming weekend we have Telson Teixeira versus Derek Lewis. So we'll talk about that card coming up a little bit. Right now, I'm just matchmaking for some of the weight classes. So we're doing some matchmaking right now for the middleweight division. And yeah, that's kind of what we do in these live streams. But yeah, I mean, also I live stream every day. every weekday, I should say, 8 p.m. Eastern time. Also on Sundays, I also stream on 2 p.m. On Sundays. So be sure to check out all the live streams. And I guess while I have all you guys here, be sure to hit that like button. It really does help me out the most, or help me out a lot. And also, if you guys are enjoying the stream, feel free to drop a super chat. It really does help me out a lot, and I would appreciate it a lot. But of course, don't feel obligated or anything. I appreciate you guys just for being here, and I appreciate all your questions, and all of that. But yeah, so for the middleweight division, obviously, as I said, we already have Dricus and Hamzat matched up, and we'll see how that fight pans out. I honestly kind of lean Dricus for whatever reason. I feel like he has a chance to win that fight. Well, obviously, he has a chance, but I think he may actually win that fight. But outside of that, we have Imavov versus Caio Bahalio. That's already booked. So that's going to be a really good one for the main event of UFC Paris. Strickland, in terms of matchmaking for myself, I would probably like to see Strickland versus Izzy, the rematch. I mean, the first fight wasn't that great or anything like that, but I would like to see Izzy in there against a guy who's not super dangerous, as well as a guy who's a contender. And I think Strickland's kind of a perfect matchup in that sense, just because I know a lot of people think Izzy's probably washed at this point, but in my opinion, I think Izzy's still there. I think the quote unquote washed aspects of Izzy's game is his reactions and his chin. His chin's not nearly as good as it was in the past. It was like very, very good. But at this point, it's just like, all right. And he's taken some big shots and he's went down, and he's taken some TKO losses as of late. But outside of that, I think his reactions also aren't necessarily that great anymore. But outside of those two aspects, which are very important aspects, but outside of those two aspects, I think Izzy's kind of still there. He still is very technical on the feet. He has good leg kicks, good body kicks, good head kicks. He still has the knowledge of the game, obviously. And there's still a lot to like, in my opinion, about Izzy. The big thing at this point is just avoiding those huge shots from, big power guys. And so a fight between him and Strickland is kind of avoiding that. And I think it's a very winnable fight for Izzy, even though he got dominated 50-45 in their last fight when they went up against each other. I think Izzy will make adjustments, though, and beat Strickland in the end. Yeah, that's fair. I don't stream any games. I kind of just talk about MMA and whatnot, but that's pretty cool though that you were streaming League of Legends and all that. But yeah, it's pretty cool. But yeah, so I would do Strickland and Izzy. Outside of that, I would do well, honestly, a lot of these guys are actually already booked. Imavov is already fighting Caio Bahalio. Hamza Chimaev is already fighting the champion Dricus. Whitaker is already fighting RDR. Jared Cannonier is already fighting MVP. Roman Dolidze is already fighting Fluffy Hernandez. Marvin Vettori is already fighting Brennan Allen. Paulo Costa is already fighting Roman Kopylov. And everybody's booked. That's pretty crazy. Everybody's booked for the middleweight division outside of Izzy, Strickland, and Abus Nurmagomedov. Unless he does have a fight booked. I don't think he does. But yeah, I don't know. Those are the only three guys. So I would probably match make Strickland and Izzy, and I guess that's it. Everybody else is booked, essentially. I'm going to use it more. For example. That's fair. Yeah, maybe I'll look to make a better logo or whatever. Just have something to stand out a little bit more. That's fair. I could definitely look into that. And yeah, I mean, I guess the last division we didn't talk about is the heavyweight division. Tom Aspinall is probably going to fight Cyril Gane, I'm assuming. Then I would like to see probably Volkov versus Curtis Blades. I like. Sergey's already fighting Acosta. Then I would like to see Almeida versus tough spot for Almeida, actually. I don't really know who he should fight. He should probably fight someone ahead of him, but everybody ahead of him is either taken or I would like to see them go up against somebody else. Um, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so Curtis Blade, or sorry, Tom Aspinall, Ciryl Gane, Volkov versus Curtis Blades. I would like to see. Sergey's already fighting Acosta. So then for Almeida, it's got to be Almeida versus Tybura or Almeida versus Spivak, and he's going to win those fights. That's pretty cool. You're a graphic designer and animator. That's pretty cool. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Not too much matchmaking, honestly, for the heavyweight division. Um, but yeah. All right, 1 second, boys. I'll be right back. 1 second, 1 second. Boys, yeah. What's going on, chat? Sorry about that. I'm back. Just had to do a quick nut check. Does anyone know what that's from? It's from the Practical Jokers. If anyone didn't know. But yeah, I mean, we've been streaming for for a cool hour and a half, just about. It's been a good stream. It's been fun talking to you boys, talking about Goatless and talking about some other fights or potential fights coming up and whatnot. It's been fun. But yeah, I mean, if you guys have any last second questions or anything like that, feel free to let me know. I'll certainly answer all your questions. But if not, yeah, I mean, it's been a good stream. I'll certainly be streaming tomorrow as well. I'll probably have some things prepared for tomorrow. Maybe some videos we can react to, some upcoming fights we can talk about. Hopefully, we get some news as well that we can talk about. And yeah, so I'll see you guys tomorrow. I'll be streaming tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern time. Also have a YouTube video coming out at 2 p.m. Eastern time. So be sure to check that out. It's going to be a video on the White House, Conor McGregor and John Jones potentially fighting there. Um, and yeah, so that should be a fun one. And yeah, after that, we'll see you on the live stream at 8 p.m. Eastern time. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the live stream. It certainly was pretty fun. Yeah, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace out, boys.